All right, so when I was going into these books originally, the other book that I looked at pretty much had this as kind of like the introduction chapter to biomechanics. So it's a little more like the physics-based is kind of where we're going on this, rather than kind of the applied part of it that we're trying to do more in this class. So we're going to go fairly quick through it and see what we can do here. So say, what is meant by work, power, and energy? Say the other textbook that I looked at, that was like the first three things that it talked about, like friction and all the numbers that went with it. And I was like, that's not quite how I want it. So we're doing this a little later after kind of learning all the things first. So we've learned about Newton's three laws, how they describe how we measure motion in an athlete, and you guys have tried to do that in your labs. How did the disc golf go when you tried to analyze that? Did anybody get how fast they rotated? I was curious if anybody figured that out, because I wanted to share it with the rest of the group. Because it would have been interesting to say, how fast is your angular rotation? Because you'd have to look at like frames per second on your phone to how many frames it took you to get from the start to the end. You can say it went 180 degrees in this much time, so your angular velocity was this. Would have been interesting if any. I didn't get that far. Did anybody try to go play frisbee golf after? You remember there were trucks driving around when we were playing golf? They cut down 4 trees. And so all the 4 holes at the end that we played there in that flat area are all covered, have trees laying across them now. I'm like, man, that's no fun. So it's a good thing we did it when we did, pretty much. So we're going to go over the how to analyze human motion in terms of energy and work. Here, so here's all the terms you need to know. There's probably going to be 4 or 5 questions, like one per one, and they're going to have like all of these on there, so you know which one's which. So you can answer it as a multiple choice there. So work is the measure of how much force is applied over a distance. Remember that from earlier, as it has to have a distance to be able to measure it as work. Power is how much work is done over a period. Usually that's time. Energy is how much work over a certain distance that you can do. Rebound is a new one today. So that's a measure of how much springs back after hitting or colliding with something. So that could be a ball bouncing on the ground. That could be a person jumping on a trampoline. Or in my case, watching a 3-year-old bounce on a trampoline this weekend. That was kind of entertaining. He doesn't go very high, thank goodness. And then friction would be the measure of resistance on a certain movement, usually on an inclined plane of some sort. So work is done, when work is done, it means that an object or an athlete is applying force over a particular distance. So usually you'd say a car is going miles per hour. You guys figured out how fast you were running in our kinetics lab earlier, linear kinetics, when we ran outside there. That was how much work you did. So when an athlete applies force to a javelin, I heard you guys did javelin the other day. Who threw it the farthest? Nobody could beat Paulson. That dude's got such a wingspan, my goodness. So they're applying an impulse to the javelin, and the athletes are performing work on the javelin. So let's make sure you don't get those two mixed up there. So if resistance is not moved over a certain distance, then no mechanical work is done, and it's usually measured in joules. Power is referred to as the amount of mechanical over a time period, generally speaking. So 2 athletes of the same weight over the same distance perform similar amounts of mechanical work. If one athlete performs mechanical work in half the amount of time, they're said to be more powerful than the other person. So, and this is usually measured in watts. So I've been familiar with watts. I started doing, has anybody ever tried a Peloton kind of workout? So when you do on an actual Peloton, one of the girls at my last school, she let me try her Peloton, because I've been doing exercise bike stuff over COVID because we couldn't go anywhere. So I was doing it indoors in air conditioning, and she let me try hers and all the metrics that they had on there. They had like distance, time, and they always had watts on there. I'm like, why is there watts on a cycling? And it was kind of measuring how hard you were working. And so that's what we're going to hear. I haven't watched this entire video, so it may be a little bit of gibberish, but we'll see. So I've always done the triangle pyramid for other ones. So work is power times time, and then when you take one out, then it could be power is work divided by power, and vice versa. So watts would be power times time, and vice versa. To do mechanical work or apply it over a specific distance. So mechanical energy comes in 3 different forms. So you can have kinetic energy, you can have gravitational potential energy. So if I were to drop my phone, it's sitting on the edge here, it has potential energy from gravity. And what? Continuing. And then you'd have strain energy, which would be, we'll talk about this later. Strain would be potential. The more you pull on the arrow, I thought it would be really cool if I could have had hidden in the corner, like out that door, had an archery target, and then like, I wonder, and then shot that and freaked that all out. I used to teach archery. It was a lot of fun. So kinetic energy is the capacity of an object or athlete to do mechanical work by virtue of being on the move. So the more mass an object or athletes have, the faster, particularly the faster they move, the greater their capacity to do mechanical work. Usually I think about this in football terms. When you have an offensive lineman, you have this 300-pound guy, and he can run faster than, you take one guy that's 300 pounds can run faster. That would be crazy. That dude is moving, has a lot of kinetic energy. When he runs into somebody, ouch, that's going to hurt.
First of all, I think it's important to know that KE and momentum are very similar.
Okay, so I do have to preface this. I don't necessarily condone or condemn people that like to hunt. I don't do it, but I did do a lot of archery at summer camp, so I taught for like 4 summers. So just take this from the sports perspective and not whether you should be hunting or not.
Each other. Both are calculated by mass and weight, and both have an effect on your arrow downrange. In fact, you'll have a little bit of effect of your arrow while it's in your riser too, as far as absorption of sound and vibration as well. So if we take these 2 variations, what is most important to the hunter, kinetic energy or momentum? Well, if you think of kinetic energy as the hammer and your arrow is the nail, it might help you out. Also, another way to think about is that would you rather be trying to stop a baseball coming at you at 400 feet per second or a bowling ball at 300 feet per second? The bowling ball has a lot more momentum, while the baseball has a lot more KE. So there's a fine process there in making sure your arrow is exactly what you need it to be to have the proper speed, weight, and penetration. But if you look at a lot of what's been written by Dr. Ashby or the Ranch Fairy, you can instantly see what momentum has to offer in this equation is definitely being primary. FOC is definitely at the forefront of the conversation in archery today, and so is speed and kinetic energy and momentum. But when you put that all together, momentum clearly shines as your number one factor in penetration. So the important factor to consider here is you can bump up your KE simply by going to a lighter arrow, but you're definitely going to be losing momentum and losing your penetration potential. So the trick in all of this is finding a sweet spot. And it's good to work out the formulas. Every arrow company has a formula chart. There's a lot of charts you can just pull up on the internet to calculate your KE and your momentum. And it really is beneficial to know where you are. But what's most important is for guys that are shooting mechanicals, and you're looking at KE, you see a lot of articles on what KE is enough to properly open and expand my mechanical broadhead. Well, momentum has much more effect. Even though there's parameters for KE that make sense, momentum is what your guarantee is to be able to open that broadhead and deploy it and keep it driving through the animal. The goal is a pass-through. We just don't want to get an arrow into an animal. We want it to go out the other side so we have two holes. So when you are looking and choosing your arrow and your setup, take a good look at KE, take a good look at momentum, weigh out where you think your sweet spot is for your... Hi, I'm Chris.
And the concept would apply to any thrown object that we have. So whether you're throwing a javelin or a baseball, there's always that momentum and kinetic energy relation there. So all objects have both momentum and kinetic energy. So the more mass they have, the faster they move, and the greater their capacity to apply force over that amount of time. So then we call that impulse, which is what you're throwing the ball with or throwing the javelin with. Kinetic energy can be regarded as the ability of moving an object to do work. Whatever it collides with in returns will do work itself. So if I throw a ball against a wall, which we do a fair amount in the gym, it may or may not return to me depending on how much work comes back to it. So here's a little how momentum and kinetic energy are related. So if you take a 300-pound lineman running at 1.2 meters per second, they're going to have a kinetic energy of, first you convert it to kilograms, and you go pounds, kinetic energy. There's that formula I had just a little bit ago. And we get all that together, and we come up with 2,400 joules of energy is what the 300-pound lineman has. If you have a 200-pound running back with the ball, he's going to have, we'll say he's moving at 6 feet per second. He's going to have So kinetic energy can be dispersed into many different things. So momentum continues, and kinetic energy when you hit something. So like if I'm jumping on a trampoline, I hit the ground, I hit the trampoline, it's going to be dispersed into all the different springs, the stretch of the trampoline bed. It's going to be then rebounded back to me to put me up higher into the air. And how I distribute my mass will determine how much it goes up higher or lower. If you don't do anything, then it's actually going to go lower every single time. But if I can move my weight in a certain way, to go higher on a trampoline, you want to get closer into like a ball and then extend up, and then I would go higher each time. And then when I do wall walking, so when my feet are on the wall, I would actually push down off the wall to give myself more energy into the trampoline so I could go higher each bounce. Otherwise, you'll never go any higher. So, yeah. So that's where the conservation of linear momentum comes in. So this is a little different than before. We did conservation of angular momentum before. Now it's linear. So if two football players bring 100 units of linear momentum, not kinetic energy, momentum into a tackle when they collide, then after the tackle, 100 units of linear momentum still exist. So I had it backwards for you too. Momentum stays the same, has the same potential energy, kinetic energy can change because it can be dispersed. So I had it backwards there. So linear momentum is not gained or lost. Instead, we say it's conserved. So conservation of linear momentum is related, and this is where you were on the right track, Lillian, is it's related to Newton's third law, which says that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So you were on the right track. All right, so this is what our lab's going to be on Wednesday. I originally planned this one to do the lab in the middle of the lecture and then finish the lecture the second day. But we'll go grab all these things and actually do a little lab, like an in-class lab about it. All right, so strain energy is like gravitational potential energy is a form of stored energy, the bow and arrow. When you pull it back, there's strain because the bow wants to go back to its original shape. So is this the bow's original shape? No, so at the moment it actually has strain energy, and that's what's holding the string at this point. If your string's too long or too short, it'll actually mess the whole thing up. We got the right side here. So the actual strain is, it's trying to get back to that shape. That's the original shape. So when I put this on, there is strain energy already. And if I actually pull it back, there's even more strain energy to be able to shoot with. So objects have strain energy if they have the ability to restore themselves back to their original shape after being squashed, pulled, twisted, pushed out, or their original resting shape. A ball has strain energy when it bounces on the ground. So every time a basketball player bounces the ball, there is strain energy into the ball that squishes just a little and then expands back to come back to your hand. Golf, if you ever watch a 1,000 frames per second on a golf ball, the moment it is hit with like a giant driver, it squishes down and then explodes forward. So after an object is distorted, its ability to regain its original shape is measured in its strain energy.
Concept of strain energy, let us take an example of bow and arrow. We know that molecules of a solid are held together by its intermolecular forces. And to deform a solid, some work needs to be done on it. Now, to shoot a target, we pull the string, due to which the bow bends. This means that while pulling the string, some work is being done on the bow, due to which the molecules of bow material get rearranged and store some energy. This stored energy is known as strain energy. Now, as we release the arrow, this strain energy gets transferred to the arrow in the form of kinetic energy, due to which the arrow propels. Concept of
that's one type of energy. So gravitational potential energy is when something can fall from the ground. So it's stored as a result of the acceleration from gravity. So athletes have gravitational energy when they rise above the Earth's surface. The farther above the Earth's surface, the more gravitational potential energy you have. If you're going to go cliff diving and jump off of a cliff and into water, obviously. You have potential energy as you are going to jump off that cliff. Mechanical work has to be performed against the pull of gravity to get the athlete or objects above the surface of the Earth so that gravitational potential energy. So for me to jump off a cliff, I have to first climb said cliff before I can jump off of it. That's always the worst part of it.
Types of potential energy. Gravitational potential energy. Objective: to understand gravitational potential energy as a type of potential energy. Energy is the capacity to do any work. Potential energy is a form of energy that an object possesses by virtue of its position. Another way to think of it is as stored energy that is ready or has the potential to do work. Potential energy can be one of three types: gravitational, elastic, or chemical. In this session, we'll focus only on gravitational. Gravitational potential energy is the energy that's within an object when it is moved against a gravitational force. If an object is raised above the ground, it will acquire potential energy. The object's gravitational potential energy will depend on its weight as well as how high it is above a surface. A heavier object will have more gravitational potential energy. Consider a large bowling ball and a small baseball that are dropped into identical buckets of water from the same height. The larger ball will cause more water to splash out of the bucket than the smaller baseball. An object's potential energy will increase when there is an increase in its height above a surface. Now imagine that we have two balls of the same size being dropped into identical buckets of water. The one being dropped from the higher point will possess more gravitational potential energy, and so will do more work, creating a bigger splash. Water stored behind a dam or at the top of a waterfall has gravitational potential energy. Summary.
All right, so consider all these different energies in sports. So pole vaulting, that's got some strain energy, that's got gravitational potential, and it's got kinetic energy from the person running. So you got a lot of different things going in there. So your law of conservation of energy, so we've had law of conservation of angular momentum, linear momentum, and now we have energy. So after impact, kinetic energy of a trampolinist can be converted into the movement of millions of molecules expressed as noise. Some is heat, some is movement of the floor itself, the trampoline bed, and the deformation of the trampolinist's body. All your organs and everything flatten out. I found it really hard when I was wall walking to remember to breathe, because when you hit the trampoline, that's all that extra weight and all that potential energy collapses your lungs, and I get really tired really fast. So like 10, 12 bounces, and I'm like, I'm done. I can barely, because I forget to breathe, because you have to breathe at the top, and then you hold your breath to brace for the impact as you're going to hit the trampoline. So what has happened is one form of energy, kinetic, has been exchanged into other forms of energy with no real loss. All right, so this was just a great example. And so remember all the different terms that we've had as he talks here.
Because energy, we believe, is conserved. So if you bring a pendulum at a certain distance above the ground, like this, and you let it swing, when it comes back here, it is almost exactly at that same height. Cannot be higher. That would be a violation of the conservation of energy. But since the...
Let's see if I can get the sound to switch over. Nope, it does not like me.
Since the air drag is so small, there is almost no tension. This whole idea is behind demolishing buildings. With a building demolished, you take a huge mass, you lift it up over a distance h, and then you put your target, which is your house, or whatever it is, right at the bottom, when all this potential energy is being converted to kinetic energy, and so this object is hit with an enormous amount of energy, high speed, and you demolish thereby the wall. It's a glass. So if I bring this object exactly at that glass wall, and if I'm clever enough to let it go with zero speed, it could not break that glass. But if my hands shake a little, and if I give it a little push, then of course it can come back, and it may want to go higher than this, and that would mean I know you guys. Students love it when the glass breaks. That's why they pay such a high tuition at MIT. Now comes an experiment, which is emotionally the most difficult for me of this whole evening. I'm going to put my life on the line to show you that I really believe of the conservation. And you will see how I'm going to do that. I'm going to take the place of the glass. And I'm going to hold this object at my chin. And I cannot move any further back, so there's no cheating. I'm going to release it right on my chin. You realize, as you have just seen, that the slightest push, and this will be my last lecture, and no book signing afterwards. And I have to tell you something. I couldn't sleep all night. I'm going to close my eyes. I don't want to see it. And I'm going to count down from 3 to 0. But if my hand shakes a little, and if I give it a little push, then of course it can come back. And it may want to go higher than this.
An inch, maybe? From whacking him in the chin. So that is the conservation of energy. So rebound is the other one that and this is not like when somebody misses a jump shot. So when objects are separate from one and one moves away from another, we call it a rebound. So this is an important factor that happens when there's a collision, the degree of elastic recoil that objects have, meaning the force of which that object can push back to its original shape. So we will do this a whole lot more in our lab. I actually don't think I'm going to, since we haven't done this, I'm not going to let you see what this is. So the coefficient of restitution, which is going to be our lab, gives you different numbers here. So is the measure of the ability of a ball to spring back to its original shape. So after being hit by a club or a bat or a racket or bouncing off a wall. So golf balls have a lot of coefficient of restitution between 0.8 and 0.9. You'll calculate that on your lab. A squash ball, on the other hand, has a correlation between 3.4 or 0.34 and 0.57. So yeah, we'll skip over that video there so you don't get the fun of seeing it. So in addition to elastic recoil and temperature, rebound also depends on the, speaking of temperature, anybody see all the headlines about Tom Brady today? I haven't actually watched the whole thing, but he basically admitted to deflating the ball. He's like, you guys could have just given me $20 million and I just said I did it. Oh, he totally. So when it's cold, it's harder to catch or throw a ball because it stays its original shape longer. So they deflated the ball because it's cold so that it could be easier to catch, easier to grip. That was Deflategate from the Patriots back, I don't know what, 10 years ago or something like that. I don't remember when it was. So the elastic recoil and the amount of temperature and the amount of rebound were all the reason that they deflated the footballs so that they could catch them easier. Because in New England, it's very cold during the playoffs. So this would also will depend on the ball's angle, the velocity, whether the ball is spinning or not, how much friction occurs between the ball and whatever it is hitting. And I think this is the last one. Yep, friction, last thing. So contact forces are called friction, can resist specific types of movement. So an athlete may want a lot of friction in one instance and minimal friction in another. A hockey player, anybody watch hockey last night? I watched the end of Game 7. There's been 2 Game 7s in a row. That was really fun. I don't watch a lot of hockey, but I do like Game 7s. Yeah, I was kind of sad. I have some friends that are really big Maple Leaf fans that I used to work with. Yeah, they're sorry. No, I'm not Canadian at all, but there were a lot of Canadians at the school I was working at, so they were all like, finally, the Maple Leafs might win something, and they lost again. So I sent them a text 2 days ago when they lost. To say, I'm sorry for your loss. Huh? It probably is, but I mean, they blew it last year after setting all kinds of records. Are you a Boston person? Oh, wow. So we're all talking. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't be talking about Tom Brady and Deflategate. That's like taboo there. So hockey, when they're skating, they want minimal amount of friction so they can go as fast as possible. So you got static friction and dynamic friction are the two. So static is what exists between two contacting surfaces of two resting objects to provide a resistive force. One way of testing this, if I had a piece of like plywood or something, you'd put your shoe on there, and how much grip your shoe has would determine how far you could move, how far you could tip it up before it slides. So dynamic friction would be kind of a subdivided of sliding friction and rolling friction. So sliding would be like hockey, rolling would be like roller hockey or skateboarding or biking. So you'll have static friction where everything is the same for as long, you sitting there have static friction with you in the chair. And then until you add some dynamic friction to it, it will not move from place to place. So the football, I don't know, what were these things called? Anybody ever done these? I've never done blocking for football like this. What are these things called? Sleds. There we go. So the sled has static friction as it's sitting there. Until you press on it, then you're going to get dynamic friction. And if you leave it on the ground, Shamar, if you don't lift up on it, is it harder to pull, harder to push? So like you have to pick it up to make it move. That is all working with friction in sport there. All right, questions on assignments?
Labs due today and journals due tomorrow.
I think I put the due, I was supposed to make it due today, but I'm not going to change it again.
So labs due today and journals tomorrow? Okay.
And journals due by noon tomorrow. So like before class. The lab was the disc golf. So you need to record yourself throwing a disc. Do you need to borrow some? Or do you? Let's see if I got one in the. It might all be.
You just said yes.
Wait, don't you guys always do those?
Let's see how we pick D. What you just applied to. Sierra College?
Sierra? Really good. Bro, what is this guy?
She's bigger than you. I'm not kidding.
Zach.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we could potentially meet this week just to talk about fall quarter and like grades and small stuff like that? I don't know what your schedule looks like, but
I have 9 till noon free pretty much.
oh, could we potentially do like 20 minutes before this class? Yeah. Is there anything that works for you? Or I have an 11 block this whole quarter.
Whatever one works best for you, you tell me. I can make it work.
Okay, could we do tomorrow then? Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow would be good because you guys are all doing the presenting. So I don't like if you want to do this on Wednesday. I got to set up a bunch. I've put a ladder in the gym and that kind of thing. So it would be best. Tomorrow would be better.
Okay, in here.
Yep, in here.
Just I can solidify my fall schedule and then.
Yeah, I need to send an email out about that to all my advisees. Be like, now's the time to sign up for next quarter, so that we can get everybody. Cause they're really trying to get me into this every other year classes. So like sophomores and juniors for next year need to be like, you got to be on and get that last 2 years because it ain't gonna be these 2 and 3 person classes anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. So tomorrow, I'm making a calendar thing for myself. Meet with Kimmy. Did I mess your grade up? Is that what you were hinting to? Because I know I
No,
think.
I think it just was. There was one thing that I turned it in late. We talked about it. Won't happen again, but I think it's still a 0.
Yep.
But no, it was. I think that's that one thing.
And I can add you. I'm trying to learn how to use this thing so it'll send you an email and say accept, and then it goes on my calendar, and then it'll give me a reminder.
Oh, wait, what is that? What you're saying?
It's just through Teams or through Outlook.
Oh.
So if I create it in Outlook, then it will kind of like tomorrow. I have a 4 o'clock meeting with a whole bunch of people. So those kinds of things. So I was trying to keep all my appointments because I have ADHD and I forget things.
Yeah.
So this is my learned traits of being organized.